1992 is a year that all Testament fans are going to remember, well, at least until recently. Before the reformation of Testament and the two albums that they have released here in the 2000s, this is certainly a date that would register in their minds, considering this album that we're about to speak about today was the last to feature drummer Louis Clemente, but more importantly, at least for most people, it was the last one to feature guitarist Alex Skolnick. Perhaps the reception of this album, perhaps the way in which this was constructed was one of the main reasons why that happened, but we're going to explore all of that momentarily. The album that we're speaking about is, of course, The Ritual, and I, of course, preluded this in one of the other videos in this very same discography series, saying that The Ritual was probably my favorite Testament album, and that's probably something that's going to cause a whole hell of a shitstorm, because this is certainly not an album that seems to really garner that opinion. It's almost like saying that your favorite album by Metallica is the Black Album. It's something that seems very generalized, almost like it's the everyman's opinion. Well, I have my reasons, but it's certainly probably not the same reasons as many others. This was my first Testament album. The New Order was my second, and I kind of went from there. Souls of Black was actually my third, the one that we just talked about. However, The Ritual was my very first Testament album, and it was certainly one that was ripe of new experience. It was definitely something that had the strong stench of awesomeness to it. I heard Electric Crown, I believe, on one of those metal stations that you get on the TV with the digital cable and stuff like that, and just absolutely loved the shit out of it. So, yeah, it was definitely an awesome experience for me, and then the minute that I got the album and listened to it, I was just blown away. I definitely started to view Alex Skolnick as a form of guitar god almost instantaneously, and I definitely enjoyed the band's sensibilities and their way in which they were able to really craft together some really awesome songs on this album. Musically speaking, though, this is an album that is extremely different from their first four releases. Much like the fourth album, Souls of Black, and third album, Practice What You Preach, seemed to kind of expand the horizons a little bit, this was an album that definitely seemed to expand them at a more rapid pace. This was something where it was extremely noticeable, as opposed to the previous two albums, where it only seemed to happen in little short bursts, and that was all the more in which was done with it. Whenever you could first look at this album, you start to notice that the song tracks are all of a sudden a little bit longer. We have the 7.5-minute long song, The Ritual. We have As the Seasons Gray, which eclipses 6 minutes in length. And then we, of course, have Return to Serenity, the monstrous ballad, at 6:25. So, compared to Souls of Black, where the total runtime averaged the songs out at less than 4 minutes, this is certainly one that's a little bit more expansive. Now, the very first thing that I'm going to say about this album that I really enjoy about this is the flow of it. I mean, these are 11 tracks, or really it's 10 if you want to discount the 30-second long intro, that just really have a great flow together. From one to another, they just move so seamlessly and so effortlessly. Not to mention, these are great tracks as well. Electric Crown flows right into So Many Lies. Both of them have fantastic lyricisms. They have just excellent riffage, and you know what? It doesn't necessarily have to be over-the-top crazy, and it doesn't have to be thrash till your neck falls off in order for these songs to be really good, because these are two tracks that are able to do so with the slightly slower tempo without it being absolutely breakneck pace. So that's something that you definitely have to take into consideration. Once you get to The Ritual, you start to understand that this is definitely not going to be the first four Testament albums, because this is slowed down, this is stripped, this is something that relies a lot more on atmosphere, that relies a lot more on maintaining that pace and not necessarily letting speed dictate exactly what you're able to do, instead letting that pace really guide you. This is a monstrous track. This is still one of my favorite Testament tracks to this day, simply because of the way it broods along. And even though it doesn't do that much, and even though you could say that it really doesn't accomplish anything, I think it accomplishes a lot, simply because the atmosphere in which it carries really gives the album a lot of weight. And not to mention, even with that, whenever it flows into Deadline, it doesn't feel as though the momentum of the album has just been destroyed. In fact, if anything, Deadline makes it feel like it's been destroyed a little bit. But it picks right back up with As the Seasons Gray. This is a great track that has a nice addicting little hook to it, and then does one of those fade out and then reboots right there at the end to kind of extend the life of the song a little bit more, and also gives it the ability to go right into agony. But everyone's going to be talking about Return to Serenity. This is a lot of people's favorite song from this band. That is not a thrash metal song. This is one that definitely has single potential and had single potential. It was one that actually garnered them some praise. And this is arguably my favorite Testament song of all time. The emotion that is carried in this track is both heart-wrenching but also just somewhat spiritually satisfying. And I don't mean spiritually like God. I mean spiritually like, you know, a personal spirituality, where whenever you listen to this track, you have that feeling that you are one with the track, and it's just an absolutely amazing experience. I really have to compliment Alex Skolnick's guitar work on this track. Chuck Billy's vocals are able to work extremely well, and just overall the band is just really embracing the pace in which they have carried for this song and just really put pen to the paper with one of the best tracks of the first part of the 1990s, metal-related. Troubled Dreams finishes off of the album and gives it a little bit of a fury that's reminiscent of what we heard from the first 4 albums, but of course with a little bit of a newer edge. Overall, this album, many people will find to be lackluster. They'll find it to be the Black Album of Testament, the one that signaled a change, the one that signaled everything turning upside down, because, well, it did turn things upside down by the end of it, but whenever all was said and done. But I still find this to be my favorite album simply because the flow and the pace are just beautiful. I love the experimentations on here because they worked amazingly well, not to mention the material on here. The material on here is just really top-notch, and this is one thing where whenever you listen to this album, you have to do so with a little bit more of an open mind. Don't really look at this as an album from the same band that produced The Legacy, The New Order, Practice What You Preach, and Souls of Black. Look at it as almost like this was a debut album. This was the first album that we ever heard, the first inkling of Testament that we ever heard. And you'd recognize that this is definitely one where if it were a debut, it'd be considered just as legendary as The Legacy. And this is also one that sold extremely well, and it's certainly one that continues to this day to garner a lot of praise from fans all the way across the globe. So this is definitely an album where if you're not exactly too sold on it, I recommend giving it another listen, because maybe there's something in there that you've missed, or maybe age certainly has dictated a little bit of change in your thoughts. If not, then, well, we'll have to agree to disagree on this one, nation, because I love this album, I've always loved this album, and I'm always going to love this album. But now we have to discuss what's happened post-Ritual. What the Ritual, I guess, has caused. And we'll talk about that next.